Hi, everyone. I'm Justine Manzano, YA author, and one of Right Hive's editors in residence. And today I'm going to be doing a presentation called My Novel is Finished. Now what? I know what it's like to be stuck in that which direction do I go next? So I'm going to walk you through all the steps from finishing your draft to publication and all the little steps in between. So you finished your book. You've spent months, sometimes years, crafting it into the best book you can create. You've written it, self-edited it to the point of nausea, and you're ready to move forward. What now? How do you know what you want to do with your book at that point? So the first thing you have to do is decide which route you're going to take on your journey. So you can decide this now. You don't have to stick with it. You can change it later. But once you have your polished draft, you want to decide if you want to go traditional big publisher, a small publisher, or an indie publisher, or self-publishing. Now, each one of those has their pros and cons, and I'm going to walk you through them all. So, traditional Big Five publishing pros and cons. Pros, big publishing is the dream for many people. Having that, your book is everywhere, it's in every store, you have ads, you have a lot of great placement. That's really what a lot of people wish they could have. But there are negatives to it too, so we'll get into that. Having an agent to back you up and guide you through any wrinkles in the contract or disputes between you and the publisher, it's super helpful, and it puts your attention where it should be, which is on the writing and editing and marketing of your novels. Just your publisher's name and contacts will open doors for you that you wouldn't be able to open on your own. So when it comes to that, deal to be able to write a media tie-in, which is something that we really only get through a publisher. My big thing is that I wish I could write a Batman book, but I would never get that unless I have a publisher who has the proper connections to get me that foot in the door. So those are the kinds of things that like a publisher can open up for you that you probably can't do on your own or with a smaller publisher. You have more reach, so you have more books sold. You'll definitely sell more books using this method than any other method, because just based on the fact that you'll gain name recognition, your publisher has name recognition, and the publisher will be able to pull to get you on those front tables in Barnes and Noble and stuff like that. So those things, they're very helpful for getting you out there more and getting your recognition. And you have access to better industry professionals. The editors, the cover artists, they're all professional. And they wouldn't be working at a major publishing industry. They wouldn't be working at a major publisher if they didn't have a lot of experience and do consistently good work. So I'm not saying that you don't have access to good industry professionals in other sections. I'm just saying that it's less of a gamble. You are going with Big Five. They've already been doing this for a while. They have an established career in it. And so that does make it a little bit easier that you don't have to do the interviewing and the deciding on those editors and cover artists. Cons. Querying is a jungle. Rejections can mean anything from this story is absolute crap to I love it, but I know I can't sell it, so I'm going to pass. And every single step in between that you can think of often depends on as much on trends in the industry. Like we're not taking any more urban fantasy right now. That's one I got a lot. That's kind of an out trend. So we're not looking for those. You might, recently vampire novels came back in, but a couple of years ago they were persona non grata in publishing. So it's like, as those trends evolve, that might mean that your book doesn't get picked up by a major publisher. Or that your agent doesn't know if they can sell it, so they won't pick you up. So a lot of times it can depend as much on the sway of the industry as it does on your concept or on your writing. There are great agents out there, and there are also awful ones. And you have to do the research to decide which ones you want to submit to and which ones look good to you, and to decide if they're on the up and up and they're going to be good good partners and good representatives for you in your career. Having a strong agent gets you connections. They'll, if they know how to negotiate, they can fight for you to have a better contract. There's a lot in that agent decision, and a lot of it comes down to you knowing how to limit your choices. So lots of questionable stuff there. There are also a lot of schmagents out there, as we call them, and there is a separate panel this year about avoiding any kind of scams as a writer, and that is a big one. So you should definitely check that out, because that's where we talk about schmagents, and I can't even say it, schmagents, and potentially bad smaller publishers and how you can spot them. So another con, your next step will depend on the agent you have. If you have an editorial agent, they will give you edits and they will try to polish up your work even more before it goes out on submission to publishers. So that's sort of a positive. It depends. Do you want to do another round of edits? You're going to have to choose depending on what your style is. If they don't, they probably select manuscripts that are already at the point that they feel are ready to submit to editors. So some agents are even tighter, where they'll only select something that they feel like, I can just send this to an editor tomorrow and get that signature. So they might be more selective. Some agents feel like they can edit it and make it shine before they send it out, and they will do that. So you have to decide when you're querying which one you feel more comfortable with. But basically what you're dealing with at this point, that is a con, is that once you land an agent, you then have to go through the whole submission process again. So deja vu. You're now doing this with editors instead of with agents. But on the plus side, your agents are helping you, so you're not doing it alone. But that fear of rejection and all of that craziness, that continues in this additional step. So it's very difficult it's very difficult to, if you have like certain expectations of how publishing will go, that you're going to have to sit and wait for a long time, and that might affect your choice. You still have to market in Big Five publishing. They tell you, a lot of places will be like, oh no, but you have to pay for publishing when you do indie publishers, and you have to pay to you have to pay not for publishing, but for marketing when you go to an indie publisher. Or they'll say you have to pay for marketing when you're self-publishing. You will likely have to pay some for marketing in a Big Five company anyway, but less, most likely. But you still have to market. It's not the kind of thing that they're going to do entirely for you. Your publisher can do a lot to back you up, but you do the lion's share. They will have name recognition though, so they can get you again indoors that you wouldn't normally get into on your own necessarily. But yeah, that's another thing you have to consider. You will have to market either way. Your income is shared. So the publishing company gets a cut, the agent gets a cut, and you get what's left. That can be a deciding factor for people, because if you get an advance, and so let's say, I'm being somewhat generous here, but let's say they give you $10,000 up front. Although they might give you more, it depends on but let's say $10,000 up front. And you're making 10% of your, of every sale of book. You've got like very little money going back to pay off that advance. And so you do not see another dime until that money is paid out. So you've paid back that full amount of money. And then you start seeing your royalties. So it's, and even then, like I said, you're getting only a percentage of what the actual sale of the book makes you. So it's just something to think about. Like I said, none of this precludes either direction. It's more of a preference situation. Like some people just do not want to deal with that. You have less creative control. When you're an indie, you have all the creative control. When you are in a small publisher, you have a lot more chance to verbalize. Here, you can talk about it and try to see what the publisher's point of view is. But at the end of the day, if there is pressure to change something, it could be in a direction you don't love, and you may have to do it anyway. So that is another thing to consider when you're dealing with traditional Big Five publishing for their pros and cons. Small publishing pros and cons. Income is shared with less people. So when you're with a small publisher, you generally don't pay an agent. Usually you can get in small publishing doors on your own without submitting to agents. So that is a good, a positive for that, because you don't have to go through that and then submitting to publishers. But also an added plus is that small publishers often pay higher royalties, and you won't have to share that percentage with an agent. So that can be extremely helpful and can make you more money, depending, because then you also have to market. So more creative control here. There are still limits, but you're usually more looped into the process than you are with a bigger publisher. They'll sometimes do things and ask you a couple of questions and then just go forward. Whereas a small publisher, they'll pass cover ideas in front of you. Well, like I've published now 2 books with small publishers, and I got to view steps of the cover art process. I got to discuss what I wanted as far as dedication, what I wanted as far as this, I mean, you get to decide your dedication, but like I don't know why, but I am addicted to writing acknowledgements that are like 3 pages long. And a lot of big publishers won't give you that space, but small publishing has, like, I've been able to say, I want a little more space in the book, and they're usually really good about it. Even edits, there's a lot more of this is what we're going to do versus and now we're done. They take you through the steps in small publishing, in a good small publisher. And small publishers are also more likely to take risks and publish things that the market at large would be scared to take on. Particularly stuff that is off trend and isn't selling very well right now. Small publishers still might try to sell that because they aren't, I guess it's a risk, but it's not as bad for them to take on these more surprising books. So there are cons. You still have to query, and there are still some industry standards at play, so you still have to deal with that. There is more marketing responsibility in this situation than there is with traditional 5. And depending on the publisher you end up with, you can get either absolutely no help with marketing, or you can get the kind of publisher who is just super supportive and helps and throws their full weight behind your marketing. And that is great. But there is no standard here for what they will do. And the publisher may want to do a lot, but they also, if they are small, may not have the reach to get you as much as you want as far as marketing help. So that depends. There is nobody to help you figure out your contract. And so you are all alone, which means that if there are predatory practices going on at that publisher, you may not know. There are some options. There are local organizations that do help authors or artists of any kind get evaluated, get their contract evaluated, and show them the different points that might be an issue or whatever. So that is helpful, but you'd have to go search that out depending on where you are. I know I'm part of the National Writers Union and they help with stuff like that. At least I think the New York branch, I think all of the branches in the US do, but if you're outside of the US, then I'm not sure. But there are places that can help you review your contract. But there are also red flags that might show up that can make you a little unsure, and there is wording that can be tricky that is there to send you into a pitfall, which is again where I go back to that red flag situation with the other panel that I actually am on, that I think you guys should definitely listen to, because there's a lot of information on how to avoid stepping in it with a small publisher. So now we're on self-publishing. Pros: you don't have to query because you're your own boss. You decide what you're going to do and what you want published, and there are no gatekeepers to stop you, which is huge, I think. As far as like a big red, not, I don't know what I'm saying. It's huge in that you don't have to run by industry standards. You don't have to follow any rules. However, you do have to, because your audience or potential audience expects certain things from a book. So it still has to be well edited, and it still has to have a nice cover, and it still needs to be a good story. But all of those other little things, like if it's on trend or what, or having to query and get the perfect query letter, all that stuff you can throw out the window with this, which is nice. Number two, you choose your own staff. Your professionals who are working on your book, as long as you have the money to pay them, or the ability to root out the diamond in the rough that does not require a lot of payment, you can get some really incredible professionals working on your book, and you can make sure that everything is up to your specifications, which may or may not be different than what a publisher wants. Again, you're still keeping your audience in mind, but you don't have to do things by the book the way that the publishers do. You have a little bit more freedom. Another pro: all the money comes to you. You don't have to share it with anybody. You can, once you've paid your editor and your cover artist and anybody you use to help you market, then everything comes into your pocket. So that's a huge one. Publishers have timelines to get their books on the market. I know I signed with Sword and Silk in, I want to say, beginning of summer of 2020, and the book is coming out in June 2021. That is something that happens often. In big publishing, it can be 2 years. So with this, you can, if you're ready, you can just put it on the market. You usually want to give some time for pre-orders and some time for publicity for it. But once it's up there, you can decide once you're done when you start selling it, and you can decide how long those periods are, depending on when you get your edits back and stuff like that. Like, it's all in your hands, which is a nice feeling if that's what you want. If you don't like to be controlled when it comes to this stuff, then this is a nice option for you. Some cons: if you really want to create a good book, you've got to be willing to fund it. And this means paying for good professional edits, which I'm going to explain the different types of professional edits and when you should use them in a little bit. Books, like book layout and cover designers, and you should hire professionals. Unless you're some kind of prodigy, you will not have all of these corners covered on your own. You're not going to be able to do all of this by yourself. So you definitely want someone who knows what they're doing and has done this before and can help you. Another con is distribution is hard. A lot of bookstores won't stock self-published books. That isn't fair, but it is the way it is. Or when they do, they require you to be willing to refund them on any book that doesn't sell, which could kind of cut into whatever success you had on selling that big amount to the bookstore. You might have to pay them back if it doesn't sell. in addition, there's a perceived lack of quality in self-publishing, which is often not true. I can tell you that I've seen some beautifully self-published books from people who really put the time in and did all the other things that I said. They were researching, good editors, good cover designers, all of that, and they did a great job. And unfortunately, those people who don't and who try to like edit their own work or throw a cover that they did in Photoshop like 2 hours ago and they've just learned how to use Photoshop. I've seen a lot of that. And the problem with that is that it gives other self-published books an issue with sales because they expect, the audience expects that it's self-published, so it's not as good. It hasn't been as well developed, and that is often not true. But when it is true, it's a lot of people, so it ends up bringing down the quality, the belief or the expectation of the quality of your book, the person who took a lot of time. So that can be a problem. However, you can build a name for yourself with reviews and with a lot of just as long as you create positive quality work, then you'll be looked at as bad as it is to say, one of the good self-publishers. So you can beat that con if you work hard enough and do the right steps when it comes to developing your book. So that's one thing. That's which publishing you want to go with. Now I'm going to go into editing, which is really my area of expertise. I actually had self-publishing authors look through this to make sure I caught everything, just because I wanted to make sure I got you the best information. But editing is really my forte. So moving on to professional edits. When you have your polished draft, you have several directions you can go with. Some depend on what you want to do, which path you want to end up on, which is why I went through that first. Some should be done no matter what. Some will get done by, if you're a big 5 publisher, some of these things will be done by them. It depends. So I'm going to tell you a little about each of these and when you need to do them. So first of all, we have a developmental edit or a content edit. This is the big edit. It looks at several aspects of your story and it looks to make sure that things make sense. So like setting. Are your descriptions of setting strong? Does the manuscript have a good sense of place? Are there easily identifiable errors in your constructed setting? In your historical accuracy? So like if you have the American Civil War happening in 1776, like that is something your developmental editor will catch. Unless it's an altered history, and then maybe you can get away with that. But that developmental editor will know. Timeline. Do your character movements make sense? So does your character move through the setting like the dang Flash? Is it daytime and then it's nighttime and then it's daytime again, but really it only should have happened in an hour? These kinds of consistency errors, these are things that your developmental editor should point out to you. Characterizations. Does your character have an arc? Is it believable? Fluid? Do they behave in ways that make no sense according to the rules that you have created for them? Again, all of that is consistency and basic, like catching the errors in craft, and we all make those mistakes. I've never met anybody who doesn't need a developmental edit somewhere, one place or another. So there are always things that we can strengthen. Plot. Are there any holes? Are there parts that make sense? Things that you forgot to tie up? Do your setups pay off? Pacing and structure. Is there structure to your plot, or is it just meandering? Sometimes that's why middles get soggy. You want to have a good pace and a strong structure so that it moves along steadily. And building of tension is important too. So these are the things that a developmental editor will look for. If you've decided to hire an editor, you want to go with the big edit, the developmental edit first. You probably do not need a developmental edit unless you are stuck on something and you've been querying and you really want to go with a big 5 publisher, and you've been querying for ages and you don't know what's wrong with the story, why it isn't getting picked up, or whatever they perceive as something wrong with your story. Or even if I've had this where I knew the beginning was messed up and I couldn't figure out why. That's when, if you've tried and you've worked with other friends, other writers, and they've read it and they don't know either, or you're stuck in a rut and you can't figure it out, then you can hire a developmental editor. Otherwise, I would only hire a developmental edit if you are preparing to self-publish, because then you need one. But once you get from the point that you're querying to the point that you've been picked up by an agent or a publisher, they're going to do all this stuff for you. So you don't have to seek it out. But this is what you should expect. So it's good to talk about anyway. But whether you have to hire one for yourself or not, that's another thing. And that's why I feel like you should be ready to do this only if you are completely stuck and can't figure a way out of a problem and no other second pair of eyes is helping you, or if you're preparing to self-publish. So that's developmental edit. There are other types of editing. These don't take as much detail, so I'm going to go over them a little faster. There are line edits. Now, line edits go through the story line by line, and they take into consideration word redundancy, the flow of your sentences, diction, syntax, transitions, tone, and style. This is the edit where someone tries to look for a more accurate word to fit what you're trying to say, or scold you nicely for verbal echoing, which or awkward wording. So I've written sentences that have the word heard in it 3 times, or ear in it, or something silly like that. And I think there was one that they walked out the door, closed the door behind them, and door to door. So things like that, your line editor will see and go, no, wait, they doored to the door. That's not how that works. So you've got to cut all those doors out and find a different way of saying it. That's the line editor's job. There's also, like I said, word redundancy, flow, to make sure the sentences work together. You don't seem choppy and everything's too abrupt. Style. So make sure that your narration is in voice. Your characters are using the proper voice that you've created for them. All of those things. So that can be the developmental edits are the ones that you're going to rewrite chunks of your story for. This is more the line by line, clean this up, this sounds awkward kind of edits. And then you have proofreading and copy editing. And those are the same. It's no major structural changes, but it's more of a read through to make sure they catch typos, punctuation issues, small inconsistencies, like I capitalized this one place and I forgot to capitalize it in the other. Nothing that would change too much. But this is, and usually when you're publishing, this happens after you've typeset the book. So this is actually done with a close to final version of the story. And all of these things are things that will either be done by your publisher if you go the publisher route, or they will be done by hiring them if you're going for self-publishing. You don't necessarily need those to go forward unless you're self-publishing. But now there are the following ones are optional, but they're extremely helpful. And so I'm going to explain what they are. Sensitivity readers. They are important because if you're going to get a sensitivity reading done, you want them done after your developmental edit, because this might also mean structural changes in your story. So this one, while it is voluntary, it's not something that you want to leave for the end. It will It's used when you're representing any race, religion, culture, sexuality, disability, or any other like main group of people that you might misrepresent if you're not a part of that group. And that I don't mean as a main character. I believe that the movement in general for writing tends to be that you should not write a group of people that you do not necessarily understand completely and personally. But if you are going to have people of different ethnicities in your story and their ethnicity plays a major part in the story in any way, then you should have a sensitivity reader, or any other group. If you have a book character and they have a friend who travels with them who has a disability, you want to make sure that you're communicating that disability in a way that's not offensive and is something that's not going to make people uncomfortable. So that is why in those cases you should definitely get a sensitivity read. Publishers do this too, so but they may not. So you want to know if they will. It might be a good question to ask if you've signed a book that may have a part that you want to have a sensitivity read because of. You definitely want to talk to the publisher and see if they're going to pass it through a sensitivity reader. If they aren't, maybe you want to do that on your own. For self-published works, you should definitely, if you are representing any other cultures besides your own or any other situation or group, you definitely want to get a sensitivity read to make sure that you are emotionally accurate is the term I used recently. Because if what we're doing is always researching to make sure that we capture a setting properly or a historical time properly, or like, why can't that work when we're talking about people? It should. You should make sure that if we're researching people people properly, if we're researching people properly, that we are also including their emotional take on the things that are happening around them in the story, which is what you use a sensitivity reader for. And the next optional, I say optional because I think this can save you a lot of trouble, so I wouldn't consider it optional, but it's technically not something you absolutely need to do. Critique partners, beta readers. This is huge in saving you a lot of trouble as far as all of these other edits are concerned, because particularly if you are not going to pay for any of the professional to do any of these because you intend to query and get picked up by a publisher or a self-publisher, critique partners are people who walk through these steps with you and walk through your writing with you and help you. You have to really trust your work with them, and usually it's a relationship. So we trade work. I have my critique partner is a writer named Maria that many who hang out on Twitter probably know. And she is my CP, and we trade our books. Usually we're one of the first people who read the stories, and it's a great way to get, like, she'll pretty much edit my work for me. She'll tell me when something's really wrong or when there's a huge plot hole. And also she will start brainstorming that plot hole with me so I can help fix it. It is a great relationship to have. You keep each other accountable. You can trade chapters. You can work with them from the ground up with your story and constructively criticize each other so that you can create a better work. And usually you're on the same level, and both of you need the help as much as the other one does. And as you grow, you usually end up continuing on that where you're now at a different level. Like I'm now publishing, but I still even though I'm publishing and she has an agent, we still trade our work to each other before we show anybody. So it's really, or at least tell each other about the ideas we have to see how they float with other people. So it's a really important relationship. A beta reader is a little different. Beta readers are people who read your story after it's complete. So while critique partners can sometimes like build the story with you, you trade chapters as you go and they give you ideas. A beta reader is someone you give your final copy to and say, what do you think? And does this make sense? Before you start querying it and submitting it to people, because that way you can know how a general reading audience may take it. And sometimes those beta readers are other writers, and sometimes they're just readers that you know that are willing to give you feedback and who won't sugarcoat it for you. Because you definitely don't want someone who's going to say, everything's great. You want to have a couple of in your target reading group, and you definitely want someone who will just really give you that feedback. You can send them questions and say, okay, can you read this and tell me how you felt about A, B, and C, or what you thought about this part if you're not sure about it. But these are all, there are paid beta readers, but there are also other authors who trade this with each other. And it is such a huge help. All of these things, it's a way to really make your manuscript shine before it has to go through any of these other processes. So critique partners are like junior editors, and beta readers are like so helpful that you get this great reader. It's like having reader reviews, beta readers, before you put the thing out there. So it's while they say they're optional, they're super helpful. So I would encourage people to go ahead and do that. But yeah, if you are self-publishing, as I said before, which I think I already explained when you hire an editor, but you really want to hire an editor if you're self-publishing. You want every level of that editing chart that I gave you, a proofreader, a line editor, a content editor, just because you get what you pay for. And if you don't invest the money, your product will suffer, and you don't want that. So you want to make your story the best it can be, and investing in editors are where it's at. So now I want to help you with what you need for if you are going to go with a large publisher or with a small publisher. Since a lot of that editing stuff was not information that you needed, this is information you need. So what goes into a query letter? You have several levels of that. This is a little bit like quick and dirty. It's not like the detail way of doing things, and things can go out of order here. You don't really need to do it in this exact point by point order, but you don't want to go too far off the rails from there. Query letters that try to be quirky tend to come off as lame instead of fun, and so they tend to get thrown in the rejection pile. So you don't want that. So for your greeting, don't gender the person. If you unless you are 150% sure that person is comfortable being called what gender you have chosen for them, you definitely do not want to misgender someone in your greeting. So the best way to go about it is just say their first name, dear first name, and then go on. Definitely check your spelling. The last thing you want to do is spell a name wrong. Now, to be fair, most agents will probably laugh at that kind of advice, because usually they'll just go, okay, it was a typo, whatever. But you want to get it as accurate as you could, because the last thing you want is to realize the last name is, or the first name is spelled wrong, and then go, this is why they passed on me. Whether it is or not, that's not a doubt you want in your mind. So try to double check your information. It also shows an attention to detail, which is something that you should show. Consider it like a job application. You don't want to use the wrong name for people or make people uncomfortable right out of the gate. Don't use Dear Agent or To Whom It May Concern, because that gives off the idea that they are one of a pool and is definitely frowned upon, particularly because there's literally no extra work that goes into changing a first name on a query letter. And really, query letters should be well researched and should share something individual for each query letter. So you definitely don't want to look like you're just sending out stock query letters to everybody. Do you have a connection to that agent? Did you meet them somewhere? Were you at that conference they spoke at, or did you listen to them speak about blah, blah, blah? Did you see them on Twitter? Did you have a funny exchange? Don't lie about this, because agents talk to each other and they also remember these things. And if you say you met them at some place and they called out and couldn't come at the last minute, and you just saw that they were scheduled to come, and you're like, I saw you at blank convention, and they're like, I didn't attend, I actually got sick that day and stayed home, you are going to feel awful, and they will remember that. So don't do that. A good alternative to this part, if you have no connection with them, if you've just sort of read up on them and picked them out of a list, that because you thought that they had a positive, something about it was really well connected to your book, or you saw them, like I know with our agent guest of honor this year, Eric Smith, I told him, I was like, I've always paid attention to your Twitter presence, because your Twitter presence is really, he's hilarious. So when I queried him, and he rejected me, it's okay. When I queried him, he 100%, like, I talked to him about, you wrote this tweet and I made this funny comeback, and I don't know if you remember, but I really love the stuff you put out on social media, and it made me look into you and find that my book would be a really good fit for you as an agent. So things like that, like, just try to, show why. If you've read something of theirs that said they're interested in blank, tell them, I saw your post on MSWL and I think that makes you a good match for my story, because this can help set you apart from people who are just like, hi, my name is this is my book, and this is what my book is about, the end. It gives a little bit of friendliness to it. Metadata, your book's title, genre, age range. Those two things are not the same thing, by the way. That is something that happens a lot, where we go genre and someone goes YA. No, genre is fantasy, sci-fi, romance, whatever. And age range for adult, YA, and middle grade, all of those things, that matters. So include that. And also, like I said, word count. You definitely want to show them the length, because if it is severely over or severely under the usual word count, they probably won't want to pick it up, and that's not a surprise they're going to want to get after they've already gone through the process. A lot of editors or agents only work with certain ranges. So if they see that your book is in that range, they're more likely to pay attention to what you have to say. A lot of agents also will notice if you have not done your research according to what type or what genre of book they work with. Because if you are pitching romance to a purely fantasy sci-fi agent who generally doesn't work with romance, they're not going to accept it. And it's also going to be a little annoying. Like, you don't want to be the kind of person who throws in your query letter everywhere and actually pushes people back on the list of people to review, because you just wanted to see if maybe you could get in. Chances are, if it's not on their list of things they want, they're not going to take it. So why waste your time? And why waste other people's time? Just, make sure you do your research. So the next is the story hook. What is the core of your story in one line? Boil it down. It's hard, I know, taking a 85,000 word book and saying it in one line, but you can. Don't use questions. In this step or in your next step, you just don't want to do what if blah 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 did blah blah blah. It's usually frowned upon just because it's been used so often, and it's just a very cookie cutter way of trying to get suspense. So your hook should be, something that is a strong statement about your story without it being a question. A short 1 or 2 paragraph summary of your story without giving away the end. And it kind of like a back of the book description. You're explaining what happens, and when this happens, that happens, and this is, what you discussing, trying to come up with one that's not a question, but it's hard to do that on the fly. You have to really think about it. You want to talk about the main character. Give us the stakes. What is at risk here in this story? Leave us wondering, what will they do? I mean, how will they get out of this mess? That's the kind of thing that makes an agent go, I want to read this. I want to read how they're going to have to get out of this mess. Tell us what's unique about your story. And do it in the entire letter should be under 250 words. So you don't want to go too crazy with how long, and I'm catching myself. I say crazy and I just mean like over the top. I don't mean like, I feel like, can we cut that? You don't want to get too over the top with your descriptions and make it too long. So try to be precise. You want to have your bio in it. It doesn't have to be a super impressive bio. It could be a line just saying, I write this kind of work and I love dogs. Or just like a little idea of your personality. Like my bio always says that I'm a complete geek who loves geeky things and writes geeky fiction. And that's, pretty much my personality rolled up in a ball. So just give like a short description of a person, of yourself, and do it like in a smart way, and you'll get their attention and make them want to know more about you, which again means potential requests. On the tail end of that, just tell them that you've attached what you've attached according to their guidelines, and then thank them for their time. The next step is a synopsis. Everyone hates the synopsis. It is awful, and usually makes you want to like pull your eyes out, but you'll do it and it'll be fine. It's supposed to be a 1 to 2 page summary of the entire book. This one is the whole thing, including the end. So it's a tough thing to shove into 2 pages, but here are some tips. All of the major plot points should be addressed and the character arcs of the main characters. This isn't a sales pitch. You're just telling the story. You're not going to say, which is why my book is the most awesome book. Like, that is not for this. You're just telling the story. This, when character A learns about this dramatic event, their life is changed because blah. Make it voicey. You can work in the voice of your novel's narrator while remaining in third person. You don't want to switch to first person, but it'll give the publisher or editor or agent a taste of your voice as a writer. And even if your book is in first person, you stick to third. Your character's emotions help drive your plot, so be sure to work those in. If you're talking about a situation, say how that makes that character feel. You want to use your main plot and maybe your B plot, but none of the other subplots running through. Those things they can see when they read the whole story. But you definitely want to stick to your A plot and some of maybe your B plot. Mainly follow the protagonist and the antagonist. Unless a character is needed to explain something major that happens in the story, don't talk about them. Even if they're great side characters, or you have like a crew of people hanging around with your characters, If it doesn't impact the main plot, then I would just say, and her friends or something along those lines, because talking about every single one of them will surely push your synopsis over the 2-page mark. Include your setting, place, and time, and tie the end back to the inciting incident. So you should have the inciting incident in there. And if you want to, when you close it off, you definitely want to make the point of, this is where the journey ends, whatever journey they started out with on their inciting incident. So that is some tips. Those are some tips. There's a reason I teach my classes in text. These are some tips for synopsis writing. It's not the end all and be all. There are other really helpful. There's other really helpful information out there, but this is kind of a quick summary of some things you want to avoid. Now, quick rules and survival tips. This is just stuff that I've picked up from working in this industry in different angles for so long. And because I've worked for editors and I have friends who are agents, and I have interviewed agents, and it's just, I've edited for a publisher, and I've talked to publishers. I'm friends with publishers. So getting all of that information that I've heard over the years, I've developed this knowledge over a decade that I can share with you guys. Always be professional. You'd be surprised how many people do things that I'm not afraid to say are really not a good idea. When you're querying professionals or speaking to anybody who may further your career, they tend to reach out to people to query them through social media. So agents and small publishers usually expressly state how on their website how they want to be pitched and how you can query them. It will almost always be via email or through a form that they have, like query. I'm trying to think of the name, but they have like Query Tracker, or that's not it, but they have forms that they have preset that help you to accomplish this. So it will never be a situation where you can just pitch them on social media in their DMs. That's not a thing that agents or publishers do. So even Twitter pitch contests will require you to send documents through email or the contact form. So don't try to pitch them through social media. Don't ever try to sound cocky, like you know that they're going to accept you or that your book is the best book that is ever booked. And this sounds bad, but in practice, those kinds of books that people say are the best book that ever booked invariably suck. And it's because the author isn't knowledgeable enough in the workings of the industry to go through the trouble of edits and this and that, because they already think they're awesome, and they end up doing no work to build up their craft. So you can almost always spot a writer when they speak that way. They send things to agents. Like I said before, people send things to agents that they don't work on. Research all your agents, make sure you know things about them, that like what kind of books they like, or if they have a special request out for something. And I believe that's like, those are the really good ones. As far as surviving, you just want to be friendly and be a real person. Like, don't be like this rigid, over professional, untouchable person, but be professional while still being real. And I think you'll do well. Survival tips. Query agents in groups of 5 or 10. So when you make your list of all the agents you want to query, split it into sections, because some agents do give feedback, and when they do, it's often really great feedback that you needed. And you don't want to have already sent your manuscript to all of the agents you wanted and then get a piece of feedback that makes you go, that's brilliant. I have to work that in. Or, oh, I really should have started here instead of there. That's a great idea. But now all my agents have the book already and I can't send them new materials, or I don't feel comfortable sending, like, you don't want to be in that place. So what you do is, I usually take the list, split it accordingly, and then give feedback. When feedback is given, stop querying for a little while, try to rework your manuscript if you agree with that feedback, and then start again with the next 5 and keep going. And my other bit is find your tribe. There are tons of brilliant writing communities out there. One of them is right here at your fingertips, Write Hive. And you absolutely need to find the best one for you. They will be essential throughout your process. These people become your brainstorming partners, your critique partners, your beta readers. They're your query swap partners. And like, I mean, depending on how successful you get, when it was time to help my CP pick through the agents that actually were interested in her story, or like, which, you know, she ended up going on with her own gut about anyway, which was the perfect answer. And she didn't really need me, but in other words, like, talking through your emotions about big stuff like that, or when I'm down about getting bad reviews, because that happens to everybody. These are the kinds of things that our writing tribe is essential at helping us and talking to us. And you just really want to find a group of people that will uplift you and make you feel comfortable coming to them with all the ups and downs of a writing career, because this is not an easy career. It's difficult, but it is fulfilling, and it is a wonderful world to be a part of if you are willing to put up with some of the roller coaster moments, which do happen. So that probably does sound hard, and writing a book is hard, but you've already, you know, done that part. If you're here, you've already written the book. So it's time to switch hats, and you dive into the work and you do research now on this thing, this query, who to query, who to, you know, which direction you want to go through, and you will make it through with the right tools and a little bit of handy knowledge. You can take your book to publication. If you have any questions at all about any of this stuff or anything else you thought of that might have to do with the track to publishing, you can find me in the Write Hive Discord chat. I will 100% be happy to answer all your questions. Anyone who has attended one of my text classes before knows that I love questions and I love to help. So feel free to shoot me anything that you think of that you might need to clear up, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining the Write Hive conference. Bye.